Hi friends, welcome to my channel. In the last program, we talked about the Anatolians. A link to that program there is in the description of this video. In this video, we'll talk about the Sumerians and try to answer the most important questions. Did the Sumerians really exist? Where did they come from? And why is their language so unique? According to modern science, the Sumerians were the earliest inhabitants of southern Mesopotamia, who spoke the Sumerian language. And they were the founders of the Sumerian civilization, which was originated in the south of Mesopotamia at the end of the 4th millennium BC, existed throughout the 3rd millennium, and ended in the beginning of the 2nd. When that territory became a part of the Babylonian kingdom. But the term Sumerians wasn't known to historical science until the late 19th century. In the mid-19th century, the discovery of Ashurbanipal's library and subsequent translation of its texts revealed 3 distinct languages were written in similar cuneiform script. The first 2, Assyrian and Babylonian, were the dialects of Akkadian language. This Semitic language was spoken in the Assyrian and Babylonian kingdoms. But the third language wasn't Semitic. It was some unknown language. And the scholars for a long time couldn't understand. What is this language? Joseph Holloway considered it as the secret language of the priests, Henry Rawlinson as the language of some Babylonian Scythians, and William Loftus as the language of the Chaldeans. The confusion lasted a long time, and in 1869 Julius Opet assumed a hypothesis. If the royal title of ancient Mesopotamian monarchs was King of Sumer and Akkad, and one of the languages was Akkadian, the second language should be Sumerian. The scientific community liked this hypothesis, and in 1889 decided to call this unknown language Sumerian. Later, the scientists decided if there was a Sumerian language, should be a Sumerian people. So, on the historical stage appeared people, which nowadays are called Sumerians. The unknown Sumerian language was later deciphered. This was due to the finding of a number of bilingual tablets, in which, after each line written in Akkadian, followed a line written in Sumerian, as well as the finding of the tablets' dictionaries, where each Akkadian word corresponds to its Sumerian equivalent. The deciphering progressed very slowly, and only a few years ago was released Pennsylvania Sumerian Dictionary, which includes a listing of over 12,000 Sumerian words, phrases, and names. However, deciphering of the Sumerian language poses an enormous problem for the scientists. Instead of clarifying the origins of the Sumerians, it added to the confusion. Ever since deciphering, it has been the subject of much effort to relate Sumerian language to a wide variety of languages. There have been attempts to link Sumerian with disparate groups such as the Austroasiatic languages, Dravidian languages, Uralic languages, and Sino-Tibetan languages. But they all failed. The scientists discovered the Sumerian language is a language isolate, and it has no genetic relationship with another language. It doesn't resemble any of ancient or modern languages. In this situation, the scientists' opinions are divided. Most of them consider Sumerian language was the spoken language of some people and try to determine what kind of people it was. Others argue that Sumerian wasn't natural language, but rather a secret code of the caste of priests. Both versions are valid now, but we certainly know that after 2000 BC, when the Sumerian wasn't spoken language, it continued to be in use as a sacred, ceremonial, literary, and scientific language in Akkadian-speaking Mesopotamian states such as Assyria and Babylonia until the 1st century AD. In other words, it took on a role in the ancient Middle East similar to that of Latin in medieval Europe. This is the brief history of the emergence of the terms Sumer and Sumerian language. Now, let's try to figure out who were these Sumerians and where did they come from. There are many versions of their origin. In the last video was mentioned that Mesopotamia was the first permanently settled in the 7th millennium BC by an Anatolian people. These prehistoric people have been termed the Ubaidians. The Ubaidians are assumed by modern-day scholars to have been the first civilizing force in Mesopotamia. They drained the marshes for agriculture, developed trade, and established industries. We also know that in 4th millennium BC, there was a mass migration of Semitic tribes from North Africa to Mesopotamia. Therefore, the ethnic composition of the population was mixed here. And if we know that the Semites spoke the Akkadian language, we don't know what language spoke the Ubaidians. Therefore, most historians suggested that the Sumerians were the descendants of the Ubaidians, and Sumerian language is a spoken language of Ubaidians. Others suggested that the Sumerians were a North African people who migrated from the Green Sahara into the Middle East. But if they came from North Africa, they should be Semites and naturally speak a Semitic language. Then those linguists are right who consider that Sumerian isn't a natural language, but rather a secret code of the priests. The third version of the Sumerians' origin is based on Sumerian mythology. In the Sumerian texts, there are references to some land of Dilmun, which seem to indicate that it was the original homeland of the Sumerians. This land was located somewhere in the south and was associated with a paradise lost. Therefore, many scientists are trying to find a Sumerian ancestral homeland somewhere in the southern lands. Some of them are finding Dilmun in Bahrain, others in Ceylon or Indus Valley civilization. However, there aren't some evidence of the Sumerians' origin from these lands. On the other hand, if we assume that the Sumerians came from the North Africa, thus the land of Dilmun, a paradise lost in their mythology, maybe the Green Sahara, which by that time was turned into a lifeless desert. Another one version is that the Sumerians are the Chaldeans, well known from the works of classical Greek and Roman writers. They didn't know Sumerians, but the southern part of Mesopotamia, where the Sumerian civilization was originated, they called Chaldea, and its inhabitants called the Chaldeans. From the works of these writers, we know that the Chaldeans, who was led by their leader Velos, came to the south of Mesopotamia from Egypt. Classical writers used the term Chaldeans with two meanings. It determined both of the people's name and the name of the caste of priests. In addition to classical writers, the Bible states that Abraham was raised in Ur of the Chaldeans, and Ur was one of the main Sumerian cities. Therefore, the Sumerians could well be the Chaldeans of classical writers. In support of this version says the fact that the Sumerian language has been the sacred language of the priestly class for 2000 years, and that some linguists consider it simply a priestly secret script. In short, there are many versions of the origin of the Sumerians, but there is not evidence to support any of them. For now, the Sumerian problem isn't solved, and we can't say with certainty who Sumerians were. But whoever they were the discoverers of many inventions, the most important of which is the new system of social organization, which spread from them around the world and is still used successfully today. We'll talk about this system in one of the following videos. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss it. At this point, I wish to conclude this video. If it was interesting, leave comments, put likes and repost. Thank you for your attention. See you later. Goodbye.